Today's stream is about to start. We'll talk about code or whatever we'll talk about today. It's about to start, so please hang tight while I check that everything is okay. Sound check, camera check, lights check. How's my hair? Oh, wait, I don't have any hair. Maybe put some pants on and I am good to go. So get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Get ready wherever you are, 'cause this stream is about to start. Hello and welcome to another meeting of the C++ Digital Signal Processing JUCE, but don't tell anyone, study group. And today we have a great panel. We have Fotis right here on my side. How are you doing, Fotis? And
great. How are you?
Also on the call we have Cwits. Hello.
Yeah. Hi.
And we also have Bo over here. Hello, Bo. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, thank you. Hi, everyone.
So this is my first stream in a couple of weeks. I am a bit out of touch. So what's going on with you all? How are things?
Could I start?
Yeah.
Does anyone else want to start? I'm sort of jumping in. Well, my health is as it is, so I don't have like the energy that I like to do, and I've been doing a couple of songwriting camps, which have been fun, but that's taken a lot of time. But the programming or the coding that I've been doing is I've been mainly doing tutorials, and this is going to sound like a bit of making excuses, but I've been busy doing that and trying to learn C++. So I've been doing JUCE tutorials and general C++ tutorials to learn C++. And it's been interesting. You learn to troubleshoot. That's the good part. I was stuck with a JUCE tutorial that one that just would not compile, and just sort of commenting. I did some weird stuff and it just started working. That's what I've learned last time.
That's fascinating because there are many things to learn. There is the digital signal processing, there is the audio programming, which I don't think is exactly the same. One is more about the theory and mathematics, and the other is more about the hacks to make things fast and work. And then there is the language itself, which is complicated, and then there is all the tools, the environment, the IDE, so Xcode or Visual Studio or CMake or whatever else you're using, and then the text editor, and then finding the documentation. There's a lot to learn. So tell me more about these tutorials that you have been following and how you're liking them. What are you learning?
Yeah, it's the Audio Programmer channel that does the JUCE tutorials. I think you're all familiar with them. A British guy. I can't remember his name.
Josh.
Sorry. Josh, thank you. They're good. He's doing very basic things, and he's very thorough in explaining it. So it's easy to follow along, but the sort of the initial learning curve is so steep just to get. So you need to start JUCE. Then there's I've grasped the sort of header, the .main, the .cpp, because that's similar as with the HTML and CSS, and so that wasn't too hard because it's quite. I could use my knowledge of CSS and HTML for that, but starting Xcode and where's that file and how do you navigate Xcode and how do you troubleshoot an Xcode, and the interface for Xcode is kind of weird. So it's it's sort of, I'm banging my head against the ceiling constantly. All I've made is like a gain knob and a slider and this very, very, very basic GUI. That's all I've made so far. Because it's all been about like grasping all the different parameters of JUCE, what you need to do in order to make it work at all.
That's actually an interesting conversation we could have, because it's kind of straightforward, or not straightforward, but it's kind of like the first thing you would learn when you're learning JUCE. It's this idea of parameters and how to present them in the user interface and how to make them work by altering some kind of variable in the audio processing. But we haven't really covered how this actually works in JUCE. The way that you have to have some sort of listener for the event of the thing changing, and then have some way of, from the editor, changing something in the processor, and all that entails. We haven't really touched on any of that. So if you have anecdotes or code that you want to share, we would be glad to see that.
Nah, it's pretty basic. I mean, the code is complicated, but it's complicated from the get-go, from JUCE. You know, there's a lot of the boilerplate stuff from the JUCE files is pretty comprehensive, and you're deleting stuff and you're sort of navigating one little small bit at a time, and like I said, I got stuck for like 2 or 3 days trying to do this, just a slider to compile, and it just refused to compile, and when once I sort of got past that, it opened up a whole new avenue of things. But I'm kind of missing a file structure, or a sort of a tree for what you're actually doing, a sort of structural tree for what you're doing. This is the JUCE, this is the CPP, this is the main, this is the header file, and this is why are you doing this in Xcode, why is the JUCE an attachment to Xcode, and as compared to doing things in JSFX, which is really, really simple and really basic, and you know what you're doing, and the documentation, it's so simple. The documentation is really simple, and you can always find something on the Reaper forums, and the difference is humongous.
Yes. What I find interesting is that this structure that you're talking about kind of exists for a reason, as you would expect.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But there is a lot of boilerplate involved. I agree, and it's mostly because JUCE wants to cover many bases. So if you're doing Midi or audio effects, or if you have any kind of unusual layout in terms of inputs and output channels, like maybe your plugin is multi-channel, it supports any number of channels, that sort of thing is possible to do with JUCE, but it adds complexity. It's especially when you think of all the ways you can compile your project. You can create a VST audio unit and a standalone app and iOS audio unit as well. So it adds a lot of complication, because there are all these abstractions in the middle between what you want to write. And in JSFX, that's straightforward, because JSFX is only for the JSFX engine. In Reaper and some other ways of running JSFX, but mostly just in Reaper, and JUCE is trying to cover a lot more ground. So it gets more complicated. I find that iPlug2 has maybe a good middle ground in that. It is a lot less boilerplatey, but it also has less functionality, and the community is smaller. So I think that JUCE is still a good way to go. Like, there is, as far as I can tell, no comprehensive video tutorial series like there is for JUCE by the audio programmer. I don't think anything like that exists for iPlug2. But when you're writing iPlug2, it gets a lot closer to the feel of writing JSFX.
All right. Now, I'm sure I've made the right choice in picking JUCE as a platform, and the JUCE platform, the JUCE forums are great as well. You can always find stuff there to help you out, and people seem very helpful as well. And like you said, it's it's very complicated for a reason, and I'm sure once I get past those initial hurdles, it will pay off. So
yeah, maybe there could be something that they could have done to hide away some of this complexity, but I think that to some extent they did that already with Producer and the way that it handles all the project settings in the Producer app. That helps a lot. So
yeah, that's another thing. Some of the tutorials that I've started, I noticed that, hang on, this is the old version of JUCE. This doesn't work with the one that I'm using right now. So kind of halfway through it, you're like, oh, this will never work. But that's okay, I guess.
Yeah. Okay.
But my goal is to get to the nitty gritty of it, where I can actually process samples. But I haven't gotten that far, and make my own GUI. That will be the end goal, because that would be where you would distinguish yourself from any other plugin via the GUI. So,
yeah,
and since I'm a designer, so
unless you're Chris from Air Windows, he doesn't need a GUI to stand out.
No.
Yeah, and do you have one plugin or one project in mind? Is there like this one thing that you want to build, or are you just exploring now?
Oh, I have so many ideas. I have way more ideas than I have time. Currently, I want to do. I think we discussed this like a number of months back, where you have a compressor that has a built-in EQ. You know, the pre-EQ and the post-EQ. Remember that?
Yeah.
I'd like to do that, and I also have some sort of ideas for processing samples, sort of wave-shapy ways, weird kind of algorithmic ways. Plus, I have my own weird ideas for compressors.
Yeah, and you have prototyped many of them already in JS Effect, so you know that they work, and it's mostly a matter of creating the VST for the compressors, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Be right back.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So what about the language itself? C++ is a complicated language with many concepts like object orientation, and that's not something that you would find in HTML and CSS, for instance. So how are you dealing with the language itself?
Well, there's also the new sort of syntax with the sort of it took a while before I needed to go. What's a namespace? Why are they? I ask you why the double colons, and then there's some still. And again, there's still a bit of a hurdle just getting the syntax of it. But I guess that's also why I'm doing other tutorials apart from the JUCE tutorials. So the specific like object-oriented tutorials that I've done a couple.
Can you like bring up some that you particularly liked?
I've downloaded them from YouTube, so they're on my hard drive, so that I can. YouTube is sort of rewinding, and that's so a lot complicated on YouTube, so I've set them up on my hard drive, so it's way easier to run through them. But there's so many. There's so many. And it's been a while since I downloaded them, so I don't remember the channels for them. Okay,
fair enough. Do you have experience writing JavaScript as well? Because you mentioned HTML and JavaScript, HTML and CSS, and JavaScript is closer to being a language like C++ than HTML and CSS.
The JavaScript coding that I've done is that I've taken existing JavaScripts and modified them. I've never written a JavaScript from scratch. I've written HTML and CSS from scratch, but never a JavaScript. So it's always like modifying it and copying code and copying something from something else, and then making something work. So that's the extent of JavaScript.
Okay, because there are some concepts that translate, particularly the part that we care about the most, the idea of manipulating numbers. The kind of numbers that exist in JavaScript are similar or in some ways the same as the kinds of numbers you would find in C++. So when we talk about floating points and the operations on floating points and problems that you can run into when operating on them, the floating points in JavaScript and C++ follow the same standard, the IEEE 764, I think. Anyway, it's the same standard. So the operations on them are going to result in similar issues. So if you were familiar with JavaScript, particularly the number manipulation that happens there, you would be at home manipulating numbers in C++. Now, naturally, in JavaScript, as far as I understand, every number is a 64-point double, and 64 bits double. So in C++, we have floats, and we have other kinds of operations on them. We have integers that work differently, and there are manipulations and tricks you can play with that don't really make sense in JavaScript, but still, it would be a step closer to C++.
Yeah, because the thing that I don't sort of get with, like I said, with JUCE, is the structure, where things are supposed to be. Where do I calculate samples? Where do I do the math operation for this? Where do I put the integers? Where do I sort of you state the variables here, and then just all the graphics, and this new, what's that, G dot something. There's a lot of things that don't make sense that I'm just sort of, what the frick is this? Sort of.
So you know what? Maybe what we could do next time is you could have a list of your roadblocks, your questions, and that sort of thing, and then you could do a screen share, and we could all look at the code together and help you. Like for things like I'm trying to have some simple code compile for 2 days and I'm not able to do it, the best thing to do is just go down the hall and find someone else to talk to, and that's what the study group is for. So we can do that.
Cool. Yeah, I'll do. I haven't even thought of that. I make notes whenever I sort of come across something. I'll make a note and then keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's, I guess, the main advantage of the study group as opposed to just watching YouTube tutorials. It's that we can share the roadblocks with someone else. And sometimes it is something that, like, it has happened many times to me, like a person with many years, decades of experience, they run into this thing that they're like, oh my God, I spent 2 hours trying to get this to compile. It doesn't make any sense. And then a person with 6 months of experience comes by and says, yeah, it's this. You're doing a plus. It should be a minus here. That's that. So it's just a fresh pair of eyes.
Exactly. Plus, it's more fun to talk to other people. I mean, I like this little social group of ours.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So
and the same thing can apply to mixing. Like when you're making a song, you need an extra pair of ears. Maybe you need.
Yeah. And speaking of our little group here, Tail is here. Hello. Thanks for being here. And yeah, we are doing well. We are doing okay. I hope that you are doing well too, Tail. Right. So how about Cwits goes next and shares with us his progress?
I don't really know what to share because I'm still struggling with the same problem I have spoken about in a previous meeting. So I can't figure out how to precisely track time and things. And yeah, basically for past 2 weeks I was struggling with it and resting, and I don't have something to share. Sorry.
Fair enough.
Not this time.
Well, we had some meetings that you showed us like a full new project, just almost fleshed out in 2 weeks. So it's okay if you want to skip this one.
Maybe I'm just a little burned out and...
Yeah, you earned it. You need some rest.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's better for you to take the time than to just lose the taste, lose the mojo
of
for doing it.
course.
All right. So, Fotis, you have lots of things to talk about. You mentioned we had a cliffhanger last meeting. You mentioned this KVR plugin you found on KVR, and now can you tell us about it?
I'm gonna leave it for the end. I have 2 more things to show you.
Oh, okay.
And it's Cwits said to me earlier that 3 may be my lucky number, because in our previous meeting I also showed you guys 3 things.
Okay.
And it's the same thing now. The first thing I would like to show you, I'm going to share my screen and share my audio. Boom, you should be seeing my screen now.
Yes.
So the first thing I'm going to show you is a patch that I made this morning in Bespoke synth, but it's a pretty heavy on CPU patch. So if it does latency stuff like noise, I'm going to just show you a video recording that I made in OBS. So 1 second, I'm going to load the patch. By the way, there is a video game on Steam that's called The Signal State. I think I have mentioned that in a previous meeting. That game, I can't show it right now. I have Steam, but I want to show Bespoke instead. Anyway, The Signal State is like a video game version of VCV Rack. It's a puzzle game with the post-apocalyptic setting where you construct a modular synth in order to save the world. It's a brilliant idea. I'm not joking.
That's great.
It even has a story. It even has a story mode. But it's a very difficult game. I am stuck in a specific level, and there is a Discord group with people who are posting walkthroughs. They still can't figure it out, because the thing about both the Signal State and the VCV rack voltage modular and actual Euro rack hardware synth in general is that they require some deep understanding of control voltages and how you calculate values, how you create logical gates between the modules, and what cables you use and where. So it can be tricky. Now, Bespoke, the thing I really like is that it was the first modular environment that really sucked me in from the very first time I ran it. It is very intuitive, and it's in very active development. In fact, I'm using a nightly build right now. And you can use it like a VCV rack, like there are some things like add, subtract. You can use it like a hardware Euro rack, but you can also not do that and use it like a modular playground, like a DAW that you construct yourself. It basically leaves out the math and allows you to have fun. And sorry, can you hear the music?
Yes.
Great. It's a bit loud. I'm going to turn down the gain. So this is my patch.
Showing the waveforms on the cables is just, mwah, I love it.
Yeah. So would you like me to explain what the heck is going on in here?
Okay, sorry, is this the same one that Chris Johnson is using?
Yeah, he did use it in many videos of his.
Cool.
So I'm going to mute all the instruments one by one.
For context, how does this relate to the plugin ideas we talked about last time?
Because this is a fun diversion, first of all, because it makes me think outside the DAW box. and it helps me understand. It feels a bit like visual programming, like I don't know, how can I, like an object-oriented language or something like that. And by building like this, it does feel a little bit like creating a plugin. And there is this environment called Flowstone that I will have to use for a project where I have to port some synths to 64-bit. I think I have told you about this. And it works with a very similar way. And I was thinking that if I am going to learn C++, which I am going to do eventually, I would like to figure out a way to do all this in code, because some people can do that apparently. Chris Johnson can do that. And I would like to see how this visual thing can be represented in actual code. But I guess I'm a visual guy first, so I want to first illustrate what I would like to build and then figure out the code on how to do it.
Can I comment on the trade-offs of code versus visual environments?
Sure.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm getting an echo of my own voice. I think it may be coming from... It started after you opened Bespoke, so maybe it's coming from Bespoke. Do you have any audio routing into it?
Oh, maybe. Oh, yeah. There it is. No, it's set to none. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Anyway, what I was going to say is in my experience, of course, yours may be different, is that visual environments are great for like throwing ideas around and not having to worry too much about the mathematics and the code, like you mentioned, having fun. Where it starts to break down is when you want to experiment, like let's say you want to build a reverb and you need a bunch of delay lines and you need a bunch of feedback delay networks and you want to connect them in crazy ways and you want some... Imagine that there are sliders that are going to create boxes or create wires or that sort of thing. And then it is possible to some extent to do that with visual programming, but then having code helps. So I don't think that there is one that is better than the other. I think that code and visual programming both have their places, and that's why they exist. And I think that it's awesome when you can even mix and match between the two. Like in some environments, you can like double click on the box and then you can see the source that makes the box happen. I think that that's a nice middle ground. So anyway.
I agree. So, would you like me to guide you through this preset or should we move to the second thing?
Well, give us the highlights, the most interesting bits.
Yeah, the most interesting things are this thing right here. This is a gravity modulator that is sending a little bit of voltage to the random pitch. So it is actually a generative patch. I'm going to use this. This is a carpless strong synth. It's never playing the same thing twice. It always moves. And the nice thing that they have added in the nightly is that you can actually now change the chance of the pitch. You can't do that on the stable version, yet you have to download the nightly. But I have found that the hardest thing for me when making generative patches is that I couldn't create something that sounds cohesive. It sounded like a bunch of random notes. So what I had to do was not only select a scale from here, the major pentatonic in this case, but I also had to create these chords and set them to diatonic, because if I don't, they sound a little bit out of place. The same thing applies here. I'm going to boost the volume a bit now. Where's the compressor? There it is. Now, the other thing to note is that this is actually a synth. And this ties a bit to my. I would like to discuss this further in the future, but I have touched upon it because one of the things that I want to make in C++ is a hybrid engine that combines samples and synths at the same time. So these are both a synth and a sampler that are kicking the same notes. Both of these are fed by this sequencer. And the thing I like about this combination of hybrid synthesis and sampling at the same time is that it gives you a whole lot of possibilities. Like you can create basically infinite round robins, and I want to create that for the next version of my drum sampler plugin, the organic calfskin kit, because I want to emulate how my friend Bill's drum kit works. Because of the texture of the calfskin, it never stays in tune. It's always slightly different. So this drum synth allows me to generate both a tone and a noise for each drum hit, and then I combine it with samples. So I created this interesting result. I'm going to mute the tonal instruments so you can hear the drums. This is just the sampler. This is just the synth. They both sound boring when soloed out, but together they blend together beautifully. And the last thing I want to point out is this guy right here, the note canvas. This is a simple oscillator, but I have created a drunk. That's its name. It's called drunk. If you're familiar with Max for Live, you may have seen this drunk function. It's a bit like sample and hold. It's a bit random, but it's going up and down a bit. It gives it a little bit of life. And I use it to pull around with the pitch bend. And also I'm multiplying the values. So here I'm actually using a little bit of modular logic where I am changing the values to bump the octave. This is the octave right here. So sometimes it goes 4, sometimes it goes 8. Anyway, that's about it. So do you have any questions before we move to the second thing?
Yeah, do you know that you can control Bespoke synth with push 2?
Oh, Ableton push, yeah. I think you can, yes.
I just found
there is this Midi controller. Sorry, there is a source code?
I found the mention of push 2 in source code.
Oh yeah, it doesn't surprise me because the creator of Bespoke synth, Ryan, he used to create patches for Max for Live. So I'm sure he has added compatibility for Ableton push. It doesn't.
That's an interesting story there. So why did he decide to create Bespoke, and what were the limitations of the Max environment?
Great question. The thing is that Max is an environment on its own. It doesn't require Ableton, but it's very difficult to use it like a DAW. So you have to buy the full version of Ableton Live suite in order to have Max for Live. And Ryan was actually interested in creating a DAW from scratch because he wanted to make, in his own words, to make his own Ableton and break it apart so you can piece it together yourself. That's what he says in his website.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds good.
And what I love is that it's very intuitive. I mean, I even invited people at my house who have no idea how modular synths work, and even they could understand what does what. So it's a testament to how well built it is. So shall we move on?
Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to load Bitwig Studio. and I'm going to load the project that I created specifically for this meeting, because here lie the other two things that I'm going to show you today. And for this example, I'm going to bring out my Alice's. Sorry, my camera is not. Can I turn on my camera and share my screen at the same time? Oh, apparently I can.
Yeah, okay, I think that worked. I
So,
just
yeah,
need to
this
bring
is-
you into the stream again. There you go.
Yeah. So I'm going to place the keyboard on my table. Hold on a second. And I'm going to show you this new plugin I got because it ties to that. Remember in my last meeting when I talked about MPE Midi and how it would function in a notation software that has a realistic pitch bends. But before I did that, I wanted to understand how MPE works. But the thing is that I don't have an MPE compatible controller. This Alice's thing is pretty old, which is where a new company called Pitch Innovations comes to save the day. So, hold a sec. So they have created two plugins. This is Fluid Pitch and this is Fluid Chords, their newest one. I had trouble running Fluid Pitch in Bitwig, so I'm just going to stick with the new one, which comes in two versions in their latest build. This is, it works like a VST instrument, so it can load. I'm going to load it just so you can see how it looks like, but I'm going to use the other version because I feel more comfortable with that. So this is the instrument version, and it has a VST host inside it, and it may seem familiar to you. Yep, it is the JUCE VST host that everybody is using. And it managed to figure out which of my synths have MPE compatibility, which is a great idea. And it can host their plugins inside it. But I don't like this plugin inside of a plugin thing. So I'm just going to use the other build, which is Midi FX. This is what the MFX stands for. And so here it is the same plugin, but it looks slightly different. And I have an instance of Surge XT with MPE turned on. And now I have loaded the default preset, and I'm going to show you the two of the three different functions. I'm going to lower my screen so you can see my hands and my keys. Is it
We
good?
trust you.
Yeah.
Can you see my hands and my keys?
Yes.
Okay. Hold on, I gotta check the MIDI information. Is it working? Oh, come on. My MIDI controller is failing. Oh, I see what happened. So I accidentally unplugged it, I guess. So I have to turn off Bitwig and start it over again. Sorry for this. It is
Interesting. When you disconnect and
malfunction.
reconnect the device, you have to restart the DAW?
But
I'm sure there is
Reaper
another
does
way to do
the
it,
same
but I
thing.
haven't found how to do it because I'm still new to Bitwig.
Fair. In Reaper, the trick is
now I-
you go into the preferences and you go out of the preferences, and then it picks up.
Oh. Yeah, everything is easier in Reaper.
No, well, I think it's silly, right?
Yeah,
Maybe
it's-
there could be, maybe there
Activity,
is an
something
action
there
to
is
like
a-
reload devices or something.
I think there is.
Yeah,
I
there
remember
is.
talking about a guy, a friend of mine, about that on PC.
So let's see if the oh yeah, it loads. You can hear the MIDI notes,
Yeah.
and you can see my hands and I want to I want both the keys and the pitch bend to be visible. You can see my both of my hands right now.
Yes.
Okay, great, because it is important. So let's go to this thing, and we have to move down an octave. So you can see here we have 4 key switches, and each one corresponds to a melody. Maybe I'm going to turn down the master a bit. So we have 4, this is one of the defaults, and we have 4 chord presets. And now these are the 3 options that we're going to play here. This is called fixed. And when I play this note and I move the pitch bend, it's going to transition to the chord next to it, in this case the green one. Goes to the red. If I press the red and take the pitch bend downwards, it goes to the blue one. So it is a kind of relative switching between chords. Now the fluid one is where the real fun begins. Basically you hold one key, then as you're holding one key, you're switching to the chord that you want to transition to. Let's say the yellow one. Now if I hold the red key and I transition to that, I have left, but it stays in the yellow. And then I go to the green one and I transition to that. If I click the blue one, for example, twice, I go back to the red. And this is only the beginning. There are so many things that you can do. You can draw your own chords here, or you can press the learn button and input some chords of your own. Sorry, I'm gonna play a simple triad. There. Now it's loaded into memory, and I can transition. And you can change up the transpose. Also, I've made a preset today that you may recognize. Are you ready? Sounds familiar?
Something, yeah.
THX.
Exactly.
Yeah.
There you go. That's why I called it deep. It's the deep note. And the third function, which I can't show you sadly, it requires a Midi sustain pedal, which I don't have. My Midi controller does have a pedal input, so if I get one, I'm gonna test that. So you play some chords, and then you press the pedal with your foot, and then you use the pitch wheel or the notes to smoothly transition between notes. And the thing is that I wanted these because, like I said earlier, I don't have an MPE compatible controller, but Pitch Innovations VSTs do not require one because they can work with any kind of MIDI keyboard or even the mouse. So
yeah, I was thinking just that. You said before that you don't have a MIDI controller that has MPE support, but it doesn't seem like you could play this, or not with the devices that I know of. You could play this kind of thing of transitioning from one chord to the other. It's not something that you can physically do on the keyboard. Or are there MIDI controllers that I don't know of that do this?
Yeah, I'm thinking you can do that with Raleigh Seaboard.
Oh yeah. Is this using MIDI 2? No, 2.0. It can't be doing that.
Good question. I don't think it does. Maybe. I didn't see anything in the manual.
I think I have a notion of how this works. So we talked about this with Dale when we had him on the stream here on the channel. So you can watch the conversation in the catalog on my channel. But as far as I understand, it boils down to very fine control of sending note messages, regular note messages, regular MIDI, along with specific pitch band, so pitch wheel signals that will get you to the right notes in between the notes.
Yeah, the philosophy behind MP is that basically every MIDI note is like its own MIDI channel, so it can have its own pitch bend. And there are other crazy things that you can do in MP, and I have seen them in Ableton. I could create them with simple automation envelopes with my mouse, like the pressure or the slide that you can do on MP keyboards, like the Rolly keyboard. You can fake them with your mouse. But it's crazy how, if I had an actual MP controller, I could slide my hands or adjust the pressure of the keys to modulate parameters in a VST. And that creates a whole new level of flexibility in sound design. And this is why I believe this would be great for a notation software, or at least a notation sampler. I think that both Ableton and Bitwig samplers support MP, and Spitfire Audio has created some MP compatible patches. And also East West's Composer Cloud has MP, but nobody seems to talk about this and how beneficial they can be to creating mock-ups of notation, because you know that Reaper has a very rudimentary notation software. And one final thing to note is that unfortunately the other plugin by this company, Fluid Pitch, I cannot show you this here because I have trouble running it in Ableton and Bitwig. The company I acknowledge is this. It's probably a bug. It works fine in Reaper, but in Ableton and Bitwig, I think you have to load the standalone version and route it to a MIDI driver. It's good in one way because you don't have to load many instances of the plugin. You just load the standalone to take care of everything, but it's still a bit cumbersome. But yeah, so this is a nice one. It's very pretty.
It's very
well
impressive.
It's very impressive, very intuitive, and there are many other things that I haven't, because I bought this today. There are other things that I haven't seen yet. Oh, yeah, I forgot you can do that, for example.
I really like how the voice leading sounds. You know, one note is going up in pitch and one is going down simultaneously. That sounds really cool. It sounds like it's choir-like.
Yeah.
I need to check this out. Fluid Chords.
Yeah. And do you have any other questions before we move to the final mysterious thing that I have left you all hanging?
Go ahead.
Right.
Okay, it's time. So I'm going to get rid of this MIDI controller. I don't need it anymore. Switching back to my regular keyboard. So the story goes as follows. I'm going to share my browser and I'm going to show you a few websites to show how this whole thing went down. I think this happened in 2019. Yeah, that was it. March 2019. So I was researching emulators and I found this guy called Hans Christian. His username is the Meister. And he had made a blog post, which I will show here. So this is this game called Nier Automata. It's a fairly recent game, and I haven't played it because I don't have a PC that can run it or a console. But so this is, I'm going to show you the effect. I was very surprised by this. This is the actual company that made the game called Platinum Games. It's a Japanese company. I think they have made Bayonetta and many other titles. But in this blog, they posted how they made the specific sound processing effect that happens in the game itself. It was very cool of the programmers to post all this, because usually, in game development, companies are very tight-lipped about how they do things. So it was very cool of them that they actually explained how this sounds. So let's hear an example. So this game is, if I remember correctly, you transition from the real world to the digital world. And when you do that, you listen to the soundtrack. And as you transition, they have created a DSP that makes the sound like chiptune, but it's not a bit crosser per se. Let's see if this thing works. Pay close attention to the music.
Hang on, before I continue playing that, are you sure that this is like copyright free and that we can play this on YouTube?
Oh, sorry. But this is only 10 seconds. I hope it doesn't cause a copyright strike. Sorry, yeah, this is a great question. Oh, I'm not gonna play any more copyright material. This is the only thing. Sorry, but the rest I'm going to show is...
You shouldn't apologize. YouTube should apologize.
Yeah, I have something else to say on this matter. I'm going to tell you guys after the stream is over. Anyway, so this guy, the Meister, created his own version of the effect. And this, I hope, is copyright free. I don't remember the song. And he actually visualized it. So let's hear it. Again, this is not a good example of the effect, but so I'm just going to go ahead and show it myself. Sorry. So this is a recording of me saying hello. Hello, everyone. This is a test. Is this copyright material? Anyway. So this is... oh, yeah. And I forgot before I go to the effect. So this guy posted it here, but he hadn't made a VST. So I jumped to KVR and I created a post, a thread, sorry. That's me. And I posted this thing, those two links, and I said, and at the end of the blog, he said, VST plugins, no plans, but plans can change. And lo and behold, boom! He made a KVR account. I think I sent him the thread in Twitter. I don't remember how I found it. And he actually created a VST, which you can download from here or from his blog post that I showed earlier. He updated it to upload the VST. He also made the Mac version. And so this is me. Hello, everyone. This is a test. Are you ready to have your minds blown? Yep. This thing can turn anything into a broken Game Boy. And it's not a deep bit crusher. It is a tone filter. That's its name. So we have... This thread wasn't very successful, but this thing, I think that he did post the source code of this on his GitHub. I'm going to check later and post it on the study group once the stream is over. Now, how does it land on actual musical sounds? Let's play a note on the keyboard again. The thing is that this thing is not particularly sensitive. Oh yeah, actually it's very sensitive, so you have to boost the sound a bit. So luckily I have my trusty Air Windows Focus. And now the plugin. It square waves everything. And let's combine it with Fluid Chords. Well, Fluid Chords, sorry. So this thing has a lot of potential. And what I said about the tonalizer thing in my previous meeting, I want to make a continuation of this. So if I grab the source code, I would like to extend this a bit further, but I'm going to, of course, I'm going to spam you guys with questions.
Yeah, so
once I get to actually coding this thing.
Do you know more about how this is working?
I didn't read the blog exactly, but I can post these links too, so you can. This is 48 filters spanning 4 octaves. You can see the diagrams and how they work. And I can also send you the original blog post by Platinum Games. So this is ultra sharp bandpass resonance filters. He did try FFT, but he used this code right here.
Okay, I will check that.
I will post all of these links in the study group. Oh, there's the source code. There it is. And there is the VST plugin in one place, conveniently. And Granite is not this is a part of Granite. What is Granite? I forgot. Granite is his own personal Vulkan renderer. And here's the C++ code for tone filter. So here it is. This is how it works. So
yeah, I was expecting a bit more high-level explanation than the C++ code.
Sorry, but I want to extend this, and I want to create a vocoder out of this, because this thing can not process transients and noise. It's like that Voice of Snow plugin that we're talking about previously, in that if you feed it some noise, it will probably create some dissonance, and it doesn't pay attention to my S's and my T's. Hello everyone, this is a test. This is a test. Blink, blink, blink. So yeah, I was thinking if we could make something that maybe combines. Actually, there's a tweak that I can do. Hold on a sec. I do this all the time in Ableton, but I forget how you do it in Bitwig. I want to create a chain with two plugins. Oh, I think that's it. No, that's the modulators. I want to create a chain that loads 2 plugins at the same time. This is replace. Sorry, I'm gonna find it. Oh, maybe that's it. So I want to create, I'm going to do it the lazy way. I'm just going to duplicate this channel. And in the second instance, I'm going to load Voice of Snow. Oh, it's without the spaces. So, hello everyone. I'm going to mute the tone filter and just load Voice of Snow. And here are the parameters. We see all of them at the same time. No, apparently not. So I'm going to turn down the noise tilt, and I'm also going to turn down the tone completely, so you can only hear the noise channel. So you can barely hear the tones. If I do the opposite thing, it works like I said in my previous session. It works like a de-esser sort. Hello everyone, this is a test. This is a test. This is a test. This is a test. So it ducks the S's a bit. But if we do the opposite, you get the S's. This is a test. And a little bit of tone. Now if we combine the two. Yeah, this is what I want to make. It doesn't, but I wanted to make it a bit more beautiful, and I want it to be playable with Midi, and maybe combine it with Fluid Chords or whatever to make a beautiful vocoder out of this. So what do you guys think?
I like it.
It's cool.
Yeah, you should do it.
Thanks.
Pretty long way, pretty much work to do, but Why not?
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah, it's going to be hard, but I think it's going to be worth it. Thank you guys for the support.
Yeah.
So that about wraps it up for me.
All right then.
I'm
Interesting
going to
stuff.
turn off my screen sharing.
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay.
All right, so let's move on to, I guess, my update, right?
Yep.
And this is what I've been up to this past 2 weeks. I had 2 questions to answer. So to recap, I am working on the VSC version of my automixer. This effect that,
Yay.
yeah, it grabs microphones from like a round table interview kind of thing. It's not for automixing music, okay? It's for automixing multiple microphones in the same space, trying to reduce the bleed between the microphones. When one person is speaking, their microphone will pick up their voice louder, but every other microphone in the room will also pick up their voice. So the automixer adjusts the gain of the microphones according to the microphone that is the loudest. The loudest microphone will have more gain allocated to it. The quieter microphones will be ducked. The effect is similar to just one microphone being passed around the room. And I had 2 questions to answer related to the most difficult part of the plugin, which is this is an unusual plugin. It needs to have access to multiple tracks of audio. And in Reaper, you can sort of do this by using multiple channels as if they were different tracks. And my current implementation of the automixer in JS Effects does exactly that. It uses different channels. But in other DAWs, I want this to be usable in other DAWs. And in other DAWs, there are no ways to route audio with so much flexibility. So I had to come up with the side channel to communicate different tracks so that my plugin would have access to all of them at once. And we already explored how this is going to work, but there were 2 questions that remained to be answered. The first was, what happens when you put 2 tracks and do they work? Do they stay in sync? And last time, I had 1 track, and I had my plugin in that track. It was in send mode. So the plugin works in 2 different modes. It works in send and receive. In send mode, it is going to listen to this audio and send it. In receive mode, it's going to receive the audio and play it. So I'm going to mute this, and this is what we had last week. And I think that the project is set up in a way that it's just going to work. Yeah, so the plugin is in send mode, and it's sending in this track 1. I'm going to mute the master for now, because I just want you to see the meters and see what's happening. So you can see that the plugin is receiving audio, but it's not producing any audio on the output, because you don't want this to go to the host anymore. You don't want Reaper to take care of this audio anymore. You want the plugin to send the audio that came in using this side channel to the receiver.
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, what was that? Was that your...
It's Siri. Siri,
Oh,
stop. Siri, stop.
on your computer?
Yeah, on my iPad. Okay, it stopped. All right, that was interesting.
A similar thing happened to me last week. My dad had his phone open, and it has this OK Google, when you speak and it pops up like Siri. And I saw an ad on the news that says that Google is listening to us. And I read that out loud. Google is listening to us. And blink, Dad's phone lights up. It was creepy.
Interesting. Anyway, so the second instance of the plugin is in receive mode. And I will bring this down. I'll explain what the blocks is in a moment. And right now we only have 1 track, right? This 1 track. And this is where we left off last week. I'm going to unmute the master, and you will be able to hear this piece of audio, but pay attention to the meters. The meter here is not going to show anything because Reaper is not sending the audio from the child track to the parent track. My plugin is doing that. Let's take a listen. This is an example of audio for the send and receive feature. So that worked. No meters here. This is an example of the meter is there. So the communication worked. And this is what I left where I left off last week. And I said, yeah, if I just do it with 2 tracks, it's going to work. No problem. And so I put my plugin on a second track, send mode, track 2. Now there are 2 tracks going on here. So I'll say that there are 2 tracks going on. Then unmute this. And in preparation for this, I already flipped the polarity of this item here below. You can see that they are exactly the same, except that this one has been polarity flipped. So they should null. And this comes out. Did you hear that?
The bump, the click.
I heard the pop.
Yep, you heard
yeah.
an artifact. It didn't really work. And you notice that I had to play again and again and again for it to happen. It's one of those issues. It has to do with the timing of when my plugin is running, which is not determined by the plugin. It's determined by the host to some extent. And it's controlled by the scheduler in the operating system. I have absolutely no control over that. So from a plugin developer's perspective, I have to work around this. And
is this related to plugin delay compensation?
I don't think so. There is no plugin introducing any latency in the chain. You can see here 0 latency, and 0 latency as well. I think that what happens here is this guy, the parent, is consuming the samples, right? So these guys are producing samples. They are writing samples into this global buffer, this chunk of memory that every plugin has access to. The children are writing, the parent is reading. The problem seems to be, as far as I understand, that the parent is reading, but the thread that runs the child wakes up again before the parent finished reading and starts writing a new block. Because if you think about the order of execution, the children need to run before the parent because the children need to produce the audio that the parent is going to consume. And this is not even thinking about my plugin. It's just how the DAW works when you are doing any kind of processing here. Like you have an EQ. You have to EQ this track and you have to EQ that track. Then you can sum up the signal and pass on to the parent. So the children need to run first. But there is no guarantee that the children need to wait for the parent before the children can start running the next block, start processing the next block, right? We always think of the audio processing in terms of chunks or blocks of samples, and there is no guarantee that the child is going to wait for the parent to be over before the child starts processing the next block. And it's a smart design decision to actually do that because you can... Oh, Siri woke up again. Fuck Siri. What did I say that woke up Siri? I don't know. I'll stop saying Siri. I have to turn off this feature. I hate this. So anyway, there is no guarantee that the child is going to wait for the parent, and that's a good thing because it means that we have more time for the child to run. So if our plugin has to do a lot of work, then it will have more time to do that work. My buffer size can therefore be relatively smaller, my latency will be smaller, my processor will work more reliably. It's all good that the child doesn't have to wait for the parent. But except in this case, I do want to have this strict ordering. I want child to wait for the parent to consume all the audio before it starts writing. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Sorry, we have a question in the chat. Somebody is asking you something.
Ah, okay. And Andres is here saying, hello. Okay. Hello. Great to have you here. Why don't you approach it from a game perspective, like the Sound Devices Mix Assistant plugin for their field recorders, or also the Waves Dugan plugin? Oh, yeah, that's actually a major inspiration, because this is the person who invented the automixer in the first place. But unfortunately, this plugin is not a plugin that you can load in any DAW. It's a plugin for a platform that is meant for, I guess, live productions, that sort of thing. Anyway, the track with higher gain is heard and the other ones are lowered 3 dB and open up when the threshold is exceeded. Okay, that's not how this one works, the Waves Dugan plugin, and it's not how the automixers in general work. Yeah, they're rack system. So this is not how the plugins work in general, or even the hardware, because there are many pieces of hardware, many mixing desks that have automixers. Automixers don't have any threshold. They just work by the relative gains, or not the relative gains, but by the relative, let's say, loudness of the signals coming through. And I guess I can, yeah, I guess I have another video about this. The video in which I do the code review for my first implementation of the automixer in JS Effects. That video, the code itself has changed ever so slightly, but the theory behind it is still the same, and I explained in a lot more depth what's going on in an automixer. And I guess not having a threshold is exactly one of the features, it's one of the great things of an automixer, because sometimes the bleed from a person talking into another microphone is louder than when that other person's that other microphone, that person who is speaking into the other microphone, sometimes that person is quieter. I'll say this again. Sometimes the bleed of me talking into person 2 microphone is louder. The bleed is louder than when person 2 is speaking into their microphone. And when that's the case, and that happens actually, and when that's the case, you are doomed. There is no threshold you can set, because anything that would take out the bleed is also going to take out their speech. So that's all I'll say about this. But yeah, there are in my original video, in the code review video, I also have in the description lots of resources, including the patent, because this was not the Waves plugin, but the automixer itself has a patent, and there are other interviews and other sources that explain this in detail.
I have a question, Leandro.
Yeah.
Do you do you still experiment with JSFX, or the thing on what we are looking right now is VST?
That's a great question. I'm doing all the experimenting in JS Effects because I know it, and because it's much faster to work with, experiment with, prototype, and I am just understanding how the thing is supposed to work. Then I'm going to translate it to C++. And then I'm going to do something crucial, which is to test this concept in other DAWs. Once I get the routing, this complicated multi-track routing, once I get this working in other DAWs, I am pretty sure that the plugin will be done in like 1 or 2 sessions, because the code for the plugin itself is so brain that simple. You just take the RMS, which I already did. I already covered how to compute RMS in a previous meeting. So you just have to compute the RMS them up, and that's the automixer. So it's a brain dead algorithm. It works remarkably well. The trickiest part is always the routing. And there are commercial plugins that do this. They all have their drawbacks. That's why I want to have my own. But the tricky part for using these plugins is always how to set up the routing. They always have to write manuals and have YouTube tutorials and everything for the routing, because that's the complicated bit.
Just what I thought that if you would do this in VST, maybe there wouldn't be that click that you showed for us last time playing thing. Maybe in other DAWs wouldn't be that weird sound appears.
Maybe in other DAWs there would be the guarantee that the parent needs to finish processing before the children are given the chance of processing the next block. Maybe. I don't know how other DAWs schedule things. I think it would be smart for them to try to run the effects in the children before the parent. If that's even the issue, it's just a guess of mine. I am not really sure. But anyway, maybe if I was doing this in VSC, we wouldn't hear that glitch. I don't know. But I have a strong feeling, as you will see, that the issue is what I explained, because I'll move on to the solution. And that's what this is. In my original implementation that I showed you last time, I was reading and writing one block of audio. So if my block size is 256 samples, I was writing into this global memory 256 samples worth of audio from each children, and then from each child. And then in the parent, I was just adding everything up. Okay, so if the problem is what I think it is, that the children are running again and processing the next block, so overwriting samples that the parent didn't have a chance to read, what if I just make the space a bit bigger? What if instead of writing one block of worth of audio, I write 2 blocks, and that's what this slider does. Now, if I write 2 blocks worth of audio, we'll see this, okay? Now that I am streaming, running OBS, running Skype, we'll see. My computer is under a heavier load, so things may change, but we'll see. In my tests, I didn't hear any glitches, no matter how many times I tried. But let's give it a listen. Okay, so no glitches happened. So it seems like if I just write 2 blocks, it's fine. Because if the child has a chance of running the next block before the parent has a chance of reading it, okay, it has that space. And just for safety, I guess in my implementation, I could maybe increase this to 3 or maybe 5, just to be sure, because it's not too much anyway. We are talking about 5 times 256. What's that? It's negligible. Even if you're running at a higher buffer size, like 1024 or 2048, it's fine. It will be at most what? I guess 48,000 would be a good upper limit, right? And that is when you're running like 16 or 32 microphones, and they are all stereo and that sort of thing. So it's fine. We can have more space. I don't have to be so... I don't have to save space here. I can just have a little bit more memory, and then I will prevent any glitches. So that's part number 1. Last time, Cwits had challenged me to put another track, and I was like, it's going to be fine. And then I did it, and it wasn't fine. And I was like, back to the drawing board. But now I think I got this. And the code for all of this that I showed is not terribly interesting, but I'll just go over the most interesting parts. So the way that this thing works is I'm using the global memory like last time, but I have this notion of the block size. The block size is now variable. And there is another cute trick that I am sort of playing. I will momentarily change this to receive. And then you will see that when I change the slider on one effect, the other one is in sync. I am back to sending to track 1 on this one. Okay, yeah, so that cute trick works by writing the value of this slider into the global memory using this, which is not something that I have covered in any of my streams so far. So it's kind of an interesting thing. It's a feature in JS Effects that is this namespace. So coming back to what Bo was talking about, this notion of namespace, that's what this is. It's the global namespace. So any plugin will see the same variables under this namespace. So what I do is anytime that you change the slider, it's going to write into the namespace. And in every block, I am reading from the namespace and setting this internal variable that the plugin is actually going to use for the processing. So that's how the syncing of the sliders work. And I can sync sliders across plugins, which is kind of cool. And other than that, I am using the global memory. I am computing the position in the global memory based on this size that is that global slider. So in send mode, I go into the global memory and store something there. I write to the global memory. And in receive mode, I read from the global memory, and I have that in a loop that is going to loop over every child track. The output starts at 0, and this plus equals is mixing all of the children, and that's what I produce as my output. So that's the code for the plugin that is doing this trick. And all of this was problem number 1. After I got this to work, I discovered that there is problem number 1.5. You may have noticed that every time I played, I started the playhead here. That was not by accident, because if I start the playhead in the middle, this is what comes out. So there is this glitch in the beginning.
Oh,
and
that's bad.
Yeah, I
And
think...
you're also starting the playhead manually. Was you trying some sort of looping?
Oh, yeah. When I was working on this, I had this in a loop, but it doesn't really matter.
Oh, it gives the same result.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's only when it's starting. You can see it's only when it's going around the loop. And I think I have a theory for why this is happening. I'm not 100% sure. I think that this has to do with the timing again. When the playhead is starting, then all the plugins are getting ready to run. So the global memory may have some junk in there, and the plugins may be running out of order because they're running for the first time, and they may be out of sync. I don't know. So many things could be happening. I bet that the issue has to do with timing. And I have two proposed solutions for this. The first is not worry about it, because I am doing the most extreme thing. I am trying to do a null test. In most situations, you're not doing that. You're just trying to mix multiple microphones. So maybe in the first fraction of a second, your plugins will be slightly out of alignment and your gains will be slightly off. And because I am doing the adding of the signals over here, then maybe there will be some slight phasing issue as you first start. But so what? It's fine. So that's solution number 1. Solution number 2 is also kind of a hack. It's just to fade in. So when the plugins start playing, I will just do a slight fading or mute the first 1 or 2 blocks and then start playing. Something like that. Just give me a little bit of time to warm up before I start playing. And if you are using this in live situations, like many people are, this is not an issue at all. And if you're doing something like you are editing a podcast, it's also okay. The plugin is not going to be running from the head of the project, probably. Or if it is, I can tell people not to do that. Right? But usually people have something like music in the beginning or whatever. So the plugin will have some time to warm up. It will be effectively like putting the playhead here. So it's a bit of a hack. I'm fine with it. What do you all think?
Try it. Just make one.
Yeah.
Call it version 0.1. See how people use it.
Yeah, we'll see. I think it will be fine.
You never know how people are going to use stuff, you know.
Well, I sort of do, because this plugin already exists and people are using it.
Oh,
But
yeah,
this
cool.
problem in particular doesn't exist in my original implementation because I'm using the Reaper routing instead of having to come up with my own. So I sidestepped the most difficult problem because it's JS effects, so I can use Reaper. Anyway, so that was problem number 1. Siri, shut up. So that was problem number 1. Problem number 2 was latency. We were not sure if the communication between children and parent would introduce latency and how that would work. So I came up with this experiment. I'm going to delete the answer. So I came up with this experiment. It's still the same setup. The children are sending to their corresponding tracks. The parent is receiving 2 tracks, 2 blocks of audio. And in this case, there are no 2 items polarity reversed. I don't want to null. One of the children has just 1 spike, and the other does not. So when I render this to mono,
Yeah, we call it the Dirac spike, right?
there are many names for this, but yeah, that's one of them.
Okay.
It's also called a delta signal, an impulse, many names for this. Anyway, so if there is any latency in this story, remember that I rendered the parent. So this is running through my weird audio routing situation here. So if there is any latency introduced by the parent, then this spike will be slightly to the right. But it's not. Check this out. And as I mentioned before, there is no plugin delay compensation going on. I showed in my last meeting how to do plugin delay compensation, but I didn't have to. It just works. So I suppose this kind of makes sense. Thinking back, in hindsight, it makes sense. What's happening is just that the children are writing blocks. The parent needs to wait for all the children to be done before it can run. So that's that. There is no latency involved. There is another situation where you have this sort of send-receive pair of plugins and latency becomes an issue. But that's not what I'm doing here. When people talk about send and receive, they sometimes talk about problems with latency. But I guess that is when you want to do some kind of delay with feedback. And there is a Reaper blog video about this, how to do a feedback on a delay, and you want to put any kind of plugin in the feedback path, and you want to do all of that in one track. So what John does in that video is he uses a JS effects that is also send and receive, and he puts the send at the end of the chain and the receive in the beginning of the chain. And in that setup, latency is inevitable, because by the time that the sender receives a block of audio, the receiver has already processed that block of audio. So there is no way for it to receive back that defies causality. So in that case, latency would have been introduced, I guess. I mean, that's how the universe works. But that's not what we are doing. We are not trying to reverse causality in any way. We need a side channel for the children to communicate with the parent. That's all we need. So everything is kept in sync, everything is kept in time, no latency introduced. We just have to have enough space. So that's why I had to have this blocks situation. But as long as we have enough space, everything is just going to work out. And I guess now we have solid ground to do the VST version. I don't think there is any other peekaboo on the way. We know how to do RMS. We know how to do the automixer algorithm. We know the theory behind the side channel thing. Now it's time to go to C++. I was, I guess, avoiding C++ as much as possible, but now there is no way of avoiding it anymore because that's the only part that is left, is trying to do this communication thing in C++.
You are looking excited about it.
I know that feel.
Yeah, and I guess, so my plan for next week, or for next meeting, is I'm not going to promise that I will have done all of this because it is relatively complicated. I will have to have this space to communicate samples. I will have to have that as a static thing that will be visible by all instances of the plugin, and I will have to debug a lot of things, and I don't know enough C++ to do that. So I'm not promising that I will do all of this. I am promising that I will get better C++. I will maybe watch some of the tutorials that Bo found. I will find some of them online, or I will pick up a book or something. I will figure it out. But I will learn some... I could take a more... a crazy approach of just saying, okay, I want to do this, let's try it, and then we'll hit the wall, and then I will Google things around. But I think I will benefit from a more principled approach of like a primer on the language and some of the principles like constants and how memory management works and all of that. I think I need a primer on that, especially because my plugin is already crashing and I'm not even doing the crazy thing of trying to have a side channel. So I will read more on C++, I will learn more about C++, and next time I will share what I learned about C++. So that's my plan. And what is your plan for next meeting?
My plan is to do more tutorials and then document what I'm doing and present something to you.
Great. I'm looking forward to sharing notes because you are sort of in a similar space right now.
Fotis?
Shall I go next? Yeah. I have two things to look up for the next meeting. The first is what I said earlier about the hybrid synthesis / sampler engine. I want to see if there are any documents on how to do that. I want to see the philosophy about it, how it works. And if I find something interesting, I'm going to share it with you guys. And the second one, so there is this guy in the unofficial Reaper Discord called Mark Heath, who unfortunately couldn't be with us. We invited him, but he said that he may join us in the next meeting. So this guy made some conversions of Air Windows plugins to JSFX, and as you can tell, the moment I saw that, I screamed like a little kid at Christmas. Because that's the very reason I met Leandro in the first place, and after I have been poking Leandro all this time to do it, Mark did it. So he uploaded a video on YouTube where he explained his process, how he converted the code from C++ to JSFX. And I'm going to watch that because Air Windows seem like the perfect candidate for me to understand DSP code in general, because I know them like the palm of my hand. I know how they sound. So I'm going to figure out how they do it. And already I have opened the JSFX files in my Reaper, and I have started tinkering with the code. I have started to fool around with values, with different numbers, and see what they do to the sound. So I'm starting to get a little bit of a grasp on how these plugins work. And if I watch this video, I'm going to see how I'm going to compare the original code by Chris and also the JSFX one. And I'm thinking of also watching that video that you made with Aria, the JSFX code for beginners, at that live stream. So yeah, I think I'm going to watch that as well and get a bit more understanding on how JSFX and C++ correlate. So these are my two things for next, unless I find a third one, like Cwits says. Maybe it's my lucky number.
Maybe you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in the middle of watching that video as well about the JSFX conversion.
Was it the derivative one that he converted?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've watched part of it. I'm going to watch it a bit more thorough. Cwits, what's up for you?
I will try to work hard and basically do the thing I'm struggling for a month for now.
We are all in that situation where you're like, okay, all the fun bits are over. Let's start working now.
Yeah.
I guess
We're all in the same
no beating
space now.
around the bush. Yeah.
We have a saying in Greece for that. It says "ta kefalya mesa," which means heads in, literally. But we say that when the playtime is over, it's time to study. So yeah, heads in, everyone.
Yeah, if only we knew that a study group would involve some studying.
Bummer.
We'll see. I hope everything will be great and I will figure out how to do things.
Yeah, you have already made the best things.
Yeah, you're so ahead of us, so thanks for letting us catch up. And I'm sure you will do great. I'm sure you will figure it out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So can I sort of interject with something? Remember when we talked to Justin, the pod stream, the stream with Justin, I mentioned Studio One has a format for connecting channels. It's sort of a mixer format. And you talking about the automixer and the routing, etc. That would be really helpful, I guess, because the sort of the routing is pre-made where you have channels going to one bus. And do you know what I'm talking about? Am I confusing or does it make sense?
I think I understand, yes.
I watched that stream, but I don't remember what you said.
Yeah, but Studio One has a separate format that you can actually code, where you can actually code your own versions of it. But it's a summing, routing. You sum channels to a bus or to the master bus, and you can do processing like an analog mixer would, like it would have characters, so you can add the character, and it's sort of pre-routed to do that. So for the automixer, that would be perfect if you could use that. You'd have the separate channels. It would sum into two tracks, and you can do the algorithmic stuff and the RMS calculations in that plugin. But I mentioned that to Justin. He wasn't too hard on it. But to me, I think it's really, really interesting concept to sort of all DAWs sum in the same way, in a sense.
Yeah.
But Harrison and Studio One do processing in the summing of the channels. I don't think there's any other DAW that does that.
Yeah, although I think I once heard of a guy who actually nulled a track in Logic and Mixbus. It was weird, but I think I have seen what you're saying, Bo, because I once got a free plugin from Presonus that's called Fat Channel XT, and it's a channel strip. And I think it is a VST version of the summing thing that they have built in Studio One.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Okay,
And I
cool.
like it. It is very good. It has
Yeah.
a Baltic EQ and everything. I like it.
Uh-huh. There's separate sort of summing plugins. There's like emulations of SSL consoles, and Toucan has this sum thing.
Toucan, yeah.
Yeah.
I love it.
But you need to route things and you need to set them up. It would be so cool if there was like a separate plugin format for summing. So not per track or per bus.
Actually, what you're saying could be a great candidate for the guys who are developing the club format. Maybe you could pass it to them.
The collab format?
CLAP.
I think it would need to sort of, you need to implement it in the actual DAW.
Oh yeah, you're right. Like a JSFX.
Sort of, more or less, yeah. But it would so help with your automixer if it was pre-routed like that. If plugins were pre-routed that way.
Yeah.
Plus,
definitely it would help a lot, but
processing it.
I don't think I'm going to use this. I will look into that because I want to learn about this, but I don't think I will do anything specific to Studio One or to Reaper or anything like that, because I'm targeting people who are like using Logic. You know, Logic it's used by podcast editors, and so I don't want to do anything that's too specific to one DAW. That's already what JSFX already is. So I will look into ways of doing this. I agree that it's sort of a hack that you have to do all this handstanding that I'm doing. But I think that this is the most flexible way, and that's what I'm going to pursue. But it is nice that this concept exists. Now, from a practical perspective, I don't think I will do this extensions, essentially, right? They are extensions to the plugin protocols.
Yeah, it's a new format, so it needs to be implemented. There's a lot of work involved with it, but I'm sort of throwing out the idea. You're not going to sort of change the world with it at any rate soon. But like you said, I'm using, again, learning to code in JUCE is so that I can make, and also everyone else here, is to make plugins for more people than just Reaper uses. So
yeah, and there is actually something else. There is actually something else to be said about this. I don't know about all of these plugins that do some analog summing thing, but I looked at, and we covered this on the last meeting, I looked at the Air Windows Console 5, I think, and the way that one works is it doesn't have to do this side channel that I'm talking about. Because to do the summing of the channels, you don't need access to the tracks individually like I need. In the automixer, I need access to the individual tracks because I need to compute the RMS for them individually. But what Chris is doing on Console 5, I think it's Console 5, is he is doing some computation on the sender. So coming back to my screen here with my project, so you all can see something similar to that. So in the children, they have instances of this sender plugin, and the sender is doing something. It's doing a nonlinearity. Let's say that it's doing something simple. It's taking the audio and adding one. Then the parent just needs to take all of them. They have been summed by the DAW, as usual. The parent is just saying, okay, now take the output and subtract 2, because there are 2 children. So it's just back to the original signal, I guess. Of course, when doing the console thing, it's doing a nonlinearity, so it's going to do something weird here and something weird there to undo the work. But what's interesting about this is that it does not have to do any kind of side channel to communicate audio through, because it's using the DAW to do the summing.
So Chris Console plugin
Thank you for watching the stream. You know how great it has been.
for the on the one hand, and when they're summed, he's doing the reverse of that wave shaping.
Sorry, Bo, can you say that again? Siri was acting funny and then decided that she ended the stream. Yeah, she went to the thanks for watching screen, and now she's back. I'm turning off Siri. How do I turn off Siri? I'm trying.
Is the stream over? Oh my god.
It should not
Deny
be.
her all permissions.
We should be back. Yeah, I think we are back now. But yeah,
Okay,
I turned Siri off. Siri, die. Siri, go to hell.
It's the only thing she is not gonna do.
Yeah. Okay, so Siri's gone. The stream is okay. Everyone should be listening to us just fine. So can you just say what you were saying before, Bo? Sorry.
The Air Windows console series, he's doing on for the first plugin is doing a mild forms of wave shaping. So you should like boosting a bit, and the sum version of the plugin is doing the reverse of that. So it nulls if the signals are alike. It's a complete null. But if there's a slight difference between them, the difference between them is going to be slightly exaggerated as per the algorithm in the wave shaping. So they're very static in that sense. But what I was sort of considering with the sum plugin summing format would be for the channels to interact in a more elaborate way, just like as in the automixer. So the channels will be communicating with each other.
Yeah, and similar summing plugin. I think I mentioned that in the previous live stream, not the latest one, but many times before. Is the one by Analog Obsession that's only available, the only one that's only available as VST2 and not as VST3 for some weird reason. He couldn't do something with the outputs. So it's called Neckar, something like that.
Okay.
And the thing that it works in a different way than Air Windows console, in that you place I think you place the channels in the plugin and then the bus. No, wait. Sorry, I gotta check it again. And car. Yeah, that's it. So I think that this doesn't require you to load an instance on every plugin. You just send every output in the summing one. I'm gonna post it in the chat as well. And then it gives you a virtual mixer, and you just route the outputs from Reaper to a bus, and you mix them like that. And it does give you a saturation. It does give you summing. It does it in a different way. I don't know. Maybe this kind of format would be suitable for the automixer. I'm just throwing out ideas.
That's interesting. I don't know exactly how that works. Can you elaborate on that?
Unfortunately, he hasn't released the source code, but this is how it works. You just create a bus on Reaper that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 inputs. So 16 inputs basically, because it's 8 stereo inputs.
Oh, I see. Okay, so it's using multi-channel.
Yeah.
Okay, that's what my plugin does. That's what the JS Effects version does.
Oh.
In fact, that's why I created it in the first place, because there is already an automixer in, I think the name of the developer is Corey, and it's in the default repack repository, so it's very easy to get. And I looked at that and I thought, hey, that's great, but wouldn't it be nicer if you could use the Reaper routing to have multiple groups if you wanted? Maybe you have a room with some people and then you have another room connected via Skype, and you want to have automixers independent per room. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to have a single control for things like the window size of the RMS computation? Because in that version that exists in Repack, you have to change the slider in every instance. So wouldn't it be nice if all these things were possible? And I thought, well, I think that the way to do it is to use multiple channels, and that's what I did. So that's possible in Reaper, but it's not possible in many other DAWs.
Yep.
And even that has a limitation, right? Because you're limited to having 32 microphones at most. And if your microphones are multi-channel, which is kind of awkward, but if your microphones were multi-channel, it would eat up on the number of microphones you could have, because the number of channels in Reaper is 64. It will be increased to 128, but still it's limited. While with this architecture of a side channel that I'm talking about, there is no limit.
I just had an epiphany. You mentioned the Logic earlier, and you know that Logic primarily supports audio units, right?
Yeah, not primarily, but only supports audio units.
Yeah, audio. Chris told me that there is an option for audio units to create unlimited inputs and outputs. They call them N2N.
Okay.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
And because I asked him once about the possibility of making Air Windows plugins for surround sound, and he said that it's already possible with audio units in Logic, because you can have infinite outputs and inputs in audio unit.
That's interesting. I'll look into that.
Okay.
Cool.
But I still don't think I would use it, though. I think that the side channel approach is the most generic one. And it's also the approach that all the plugins I know, the commercial offerings that I know of, not the Waves one. That one is only for their rack system. But there are VSCs in this space, and they all work with this side channel kind of idea. And I also think that maybe this side channel idea could be useful in other ways. Maybe you are using another DAW and you would like just here and there, not all over the project, but just here and there, you would like some of the flexibility in terms of routing that you get in Reaper. You could do that using a sender receiver kind of plugin.
Cool.
All right. So are you all ready to wrap up?
Yes.
Sure.
All right. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Fotis and Bo and Cwits, as well as Tail and PickFlip113 and Andres. Thank you, everyone else who is watching or participating on the chat on Discord. That's also a great place to be. Go to the unofficial Reaper users Discord. It's easy to Google. Just Google for Discord, Reaper, unofficial. You will find us. There is a channel there under my name. And I am back from vacation, so I see you back tomorrow. We are going to come back to my waveform display. We'll do the thickness of the contours. It will be great. And yeah, thank you all very much for being here. I will now go to the thanks for watching screen, but not because Siri told me to. All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thank you for watching the stream, you know how great it has been. Or maybe it sucked, and I am glad that you stuck with me. And soon we'll all be back together for some more coding or talking or chilling. The next time I'll be streaming.